a photon, of an electron, but only of my own subjective impressions. Consequently, we cannot even say, we have no evidence that our thoughts are in our brains because we have never had any experience of a brain. Daryl had a photograph of a brain, okay? But if the brain was here, I would not see the brain, I would see colors. If I held it in my hand, I would not feel the brain, I would feel tactile sensations. So it seems to be more true to say that our brains are in our thoughts, or our brains are in our minds, rather than saying that our minds are in our brains. If we take this seriously, then there seems to be no way to be sure that we can map all of our thoughts onto any physical tokens, like sentences or brain states or neurons or something, neuron functions or something like that, from which it would follow that we have no way of developing a proof that we have a finite or even infinite number of thoughts. We just don't know. Okay, that's my first conclusion. We don't know. Second point that I want to make, which is something totally different. You know, I wonder if any of you, we're supposed to be university lecturers and professors and very orderly, and some of us, I'm in a break between our semesters at home in Israel. We should have our syllabi prepared, our teaching plans, be very orderly. However, I never prepare my teaching plan until the last day, and I always told the students, be ready, I might change it totally in the middle of the semester, because I remember Dali. Okay? Do you remember where all the bioethicists who prepared their teaching plans, their syllabi, had to start all over again when they came out with Dali? Something new that we didn't plan to talk about, now we have to talk about this. We can never predict what the ideas are going to be tomorrow or this afternoon. One of you might come up with some idea during this conference that's totally different from anything I ever thought about before. Imagine trying to map the human thoughts before the Bible was written, or before Einstein discovered his theory of relativity, okay? It seems to me to be very presumptuous to think that we can predict what are going to be the great thoughts of the future. These are geniuses. I'm just a little guy that teaches some courses. How could I possibly predict what will be said by the next Einstein, what will be discovered in the next genetic discovery in genetic medicine, molecular biology, what it might be? J.F. Paul said we do not know what is mind. Okay, I think J.F. Paul and I have known each other for at least 10 years, and I think that we generally tend to disagree. This time I agree. Okay? I think we need the humility to admit that we do not know what the mind is. It's generally accepted today that our thoughts are either in our brain or at least can be mapped in the set theoretical sense of mapping, can be mapped onto brain states or neuron functions or something like that. It hasn't been proved yet. Okay? They seem to know the loci of different types of feelings, different kinds of emotions, what part of the brain, but I don't know. Maybe I'm ignorant, but I don't think somebody has ever said, this is the thought that 2 + 2 makes 4, and this is the thought, I love you, and this, in other words, it's a theory, it's a beautiful theory, let's wait and see, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. I think we need the humility to admit that we do not really yet know what the mind is, so consequently it's highly presumptuous to think that we can map it at this stage. On the other hand, I want to bless Daryl's initiative for the following reason. Sometimes I think that we can learn, even if we start something which I think is doomed to fail, we can learn something from the attempt. One example is bioethics declarations, okay? Every conference I go to, we make the declaration. You know, and we're going to tell everybody what's right and what's wrong. The Declaration on the Human Genome, the UNESCO Declaration, right? The UBIUS Declaration, you can find it on Daryl's website, we did that last year. The Fukui Declaration, these different declarations, and nobody ever follows them, nobody ever adopts them, no government ever makes it into a law, but we learn something from the exercise, okay? You try to put together something clear and well-defined. You find out later that maybe it didn't work as well as we hoped it to, but it's a good exercise. It's a good intellectual exercise, and we learn something in the process. There was a book written by the autobiography of, there was a famous English novelist by the name of Virginia Woolf, whose husband, Leonard, wrote his autobiography called The Journey, Not the Arrival Matters. It doesn't matter if you get there, but the journey, the trip, matters. I don't think we're ever going to get to a map of the human mind, okay? But I think that the endeavor to try can be very instructional, very educational, and so I think I'll enjoy taking part in the endeavor. Thank you. Do I call on the questions or do you? I do. Okay. Not you wait, let's see if they're all recognized here.
Very interesting talk, Frank, as always. I just was thinking from your talk and Daryl's talk in the morning, and it makes me very much confused whether you are trying to map human thoughts or you are trying to map human mind. Both we need to distinguish. Maybe thoughts can be theoretically put down on a paper as a human genome sequence, maybe not the mind, and on that point I agree. And Daryl in his talk also did not differentiate between the two. So, you say mental mapping. I mean, if you say we can't define mind, we say, let's say mind is the functional aspect of the brain. Or it may be just biochemical processes that or neurological actions that happens in our brains and that produces something. But is it thought also comes out of that processes? I mean, you need to look. I mean, you also and Daryl did not differentiate, and I just want both of your comments on both that thing. Thank you.
You asked for both of our comments. Who should comment first? Thanks. Okay. I think you make a very good point, and I want to thank you for drawing my attention to that because I was sloppy about that. Some philosophers, I used to be a philosopher before I was a bioethicist, so I have some familiarity with that. Some philosophers like David Hume thought of our minds as being the sum total of all of our thoughts. The mind is a conjury of perceptions are thoughts, which come in and go out like the actors on a stage. And he says, but there's no stage, there's just the thoughts. Okay, so the mind is just the sum total, constantly changing sum total of our thoughts. Other philosophers would regard the thoughts as the content of the mind or the result of the actions of the mind, but the mind would be something with abilities. The ability to think, to calculate, to perceive, to feel, to desire, to fear. Okay? This would be the mind. And then what I fear, or what I believe, or what I calculate, these would be my thoughts, okay? Or my ideas. Two quite separate things, okay? I'm skeptical about our ability to map either our ideas or the functions of our mind, okay? I could sit down and say, well, we can think, we can fear, we can love, we can calculate, and so on, we can perceive. But maybe there's something else that we will be able to develop which we haven't thought of yet. Okay? So I don't think it's ever going to come to an end, either with respect to individual thoughts or with respect to the capacities or functions of the mind. But thanks for calling my attention to that distinction, which I hadn't thought of sufficiently well. Yes.
Yes, well, and my answer is simple. I'm mapping ideas. So ideas are thoughts rather than mind. But the distinction is sometimes not easy to make. I think Rick first.
This is a comment on maybe, in a way I think Daryl's cheating a bit. He's talking about mapping ideas, but he's only from the discussion we've had so far, he seems to be only mapping part of the whole spectrum of human ideas. I don't know if there are any physical scientists in the room apart from me, But the ideas in physical science aren't going to fit on this map, except right at the origin. And it seems to me that when Frank was talking about ideas and the new ideas which constantly come out, in physical science, ideas are constantly, new ideas are coming out. And maybe that kind of idea, the idea where we bring some new conception out of the human mind, maybe that kind of idea is infinite. But and maybe we aren't going to be able to map that completely, as you said. That's what I think in any case. But maybe some ideas just on specific parts of human experience, maybe ideas on how we make decisions about our emotions, for example. Maybe these are finite. Maybe the ideas which we have in concerning our own self-interest, for example, are finite. And these are the ideas which are going to be involved in the kind of ideas which Darrell is going to wants to map, which is the ones which seems to be related to decision making. So maybe that part of the map can be if not complete, then at least brought to a stage where it's actually useful to apply it to specific situations. And we had the comment this morning about earlier on about a two-dimensional map not showing the three-dimensional parts. I think that's true, but you can get to places using the two-dimensional map, so it does actually have a use. So I think if you, I don't want to say you restrict yourself, that sounds very, but if you concentrate on that part of the project, then something useful will come out of it.
I think that's a very good point, which Richard is making, that we have to distinguish between ideas like you have in physics or mathematics on the one hand, and ideas which you have in ethics on the other. And I think that Darrell is primarily mapping ethical ideas, okay? But I'm skeptical about that too. I was just thinking, some people say, I don't know if this is true or false, but some people say that before they invented the Bible, there was no such thing as a sense of guilt. Okay, people didn't have feelings of guilt. Okay, but inventing the Bible gave us this idea. If that's true or not, I don't know. But what I'm saying is I don't see why there should not be new types of feelings, new types of emotions. Why should there not be all of a sudden tomorrow we'll have an emotion of the sort that we never thought of before? Why not? Why restrict us so much?
The next is Shamu, and then John.
Thank you very much for your talk. I think I completely agree with what you say about our mind isn't actually in our ideas, because well, it is, and there is no existence outside our sensory perceptions, basically. And in fact, there have been many people who believed in this and who've taken it seriously and have gone further. And I think those people have actually achieved a lot of what we want to really achieve now: environment sustainability and not going into war and different things. And in fact, that's the basis of Vedic thought as well. I wouldn't like to call it Indian thought because it doesn't belong to India; it belongs to every human being. And following from what you said, that our mind is not in our mind is only in our thoughts, and it's only sensory perceptions that actually give us the feeling of existence. The next step that is advocated is what is called, if we are not that, then what are we really? Because there is something that's called the I, and that is shortly put as Satchit Ananda. That's what we call it in Sanskrit. So I completely agree with what you said. I mean, I was just taking it a little more seriously and taking it to the next level. But I think the effort of mapping ideas is a worthwhile one, because it would increase awareness of what we actually think individually and collectively, and that's going to give us a lot of knowledge about, we're going to be facing a lot of our own thoughts, which is very good, because we're going to confront what we might not even like, but we still have to do it within this project. So I think that's a very good idea for our evolution as a whole.
I think you said some very interesting things, and I wish I had time. I would come either to Sheffield or to Chennai to study Indian literature under your direction. Very interesting. Did you say that there is such a thing as the I?
Yes.
You mean the self?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. There, a very great British philosopher by the name of Hume okay, who I'm already mentioned. He says, if I look inside my mind, I find thoughts, colors, sounds, images, memories, feelings, perceptions,
But
right?
this I,
But I never find myself.
yeah, but the
Okay,
problem
I
is
can
the
never
I
touch
cannot,
myself. Does it exist at all?
the I cannot be confined. You cannot think of the I, you cannot see the I, you cannot feel the I. So basically it's outside the mind and it's outside the sensory perception.
So how do you know it exists? Maybe it's just a
You have-
fiction?
Yeah, I mean, to begin with, you have to go, sort of start off with that. But if you work towards it, if you actually take this idea of what you're talking about, that outside 5 sensory perceptions we can't feel anything. If you take that more seriously and work on it, there are sort of rules and all that written and all kinds of things, then you can actually reach this state which you cannot comprehend being in this state. That is what is said in different texts and literature. Even I don't know that myself, but that's what exists. I mean, that's what they say. So I don't know more than that.
The last question, John.
Well, let me, go back to some history of the organizing human ideas. For example, historically, such philosophers as Francis Bacon tried very hard to to systematically organize the human ideas. But he was mostly concerned with classifying the disciplines. And even now, some scholars, some people of ideas are interested in classifying the the disciplines. I think it's a part of their, endeavor to, for mapping human ideas. But their unit of classification has been the discipline. But Beryl is trying hard to classify each idea fitting into the schematic framework. And I think at this point, Daryl's effort is too ambitious. But for a certain area of human ideas, I think it's useful, practically useful. For example, I don't think for practical reasons, mapping human ideas might be beyond human capability, currently at least. However, if we downsize the areas of our interest into some ideas in bioethics, not all ideas in bioethics, but the ideas we are faced with moral and practical dilemmas in our decision making, I think that kind of schematic framework would be quite useful in solving our dilemmas and reaching at practically feasible conclusions. The constellations between different opinions. However, even for that purpose, we have to elaborate the 6, what would be the standard of those, the dimensions of those classification.
Was that a point for Daryl to respond to or for me?
Both.
Okay, I agree with you that it could be a useful tool.
Right.
Okay, which is always infinitely correctable, and we might reject it after a few years and do something
So
else.
I agree with you in the sense that human ideas are not finite.
I sort of think of it sort of like the principles of bioethics. I try to teach my students that autonomy and beneficence and all this stuff, this is not truth from God. These are not absolute dogmas. We might throw them away tomorrow, but it's a very useful way to have an orderly class discussion of an ethical problem, okay? And this might be a useful way to have to make our discussion felt orderly, but in a few years we might throw it away and do something else.
Thank you. I'm
Is that
afraid.
it? Am I finished?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm sorry to several people, but I have to continue. We will have time for open discussion on the mental mapping project on Tuesday and also possibly later in different parts of the meeting. The next paper is from Masakazu Inaba and myself on how to assess people's views of biotechnology, some lessons from Japan. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So, the title of my paper is How to Assess People's Views of Biotechnology Lessons from Japan. I'd like to talk about the results of our analysis of Japanese aptitude towards biotechnology and interviews conducted to explore ideas. The outline of my talk is here. Trends of Japanese attitudes towards specific applications from survey in 2000 and 2003 for an overview, and interviews in 2000 to explore reasons behind people's attitudes, and an example mapping those ideas will be shown. The next slide describes about surveys over Japan conducted in 2000 and 2003. For the 2000 survey, respondents were the public and scientists, and for the 2003 survey, respondents were only the public. Data about several specific applications of biotechnology was analyzed. Next, please. And the questions asked for agricultural applications were modern biotechnology in the production of food and drinks, such as cell fusion technology, and gene insertion into a crop from other species to make it more resistant to insect pests. Next, please. And questions for medical applications. The bacteria inserted human genes to produce medicines, transgenic mouse with cancer genes for research use, and transgenic pig with human heart for xenotransplantation, and genetic testing using embryo for diseases such as cystic fibrosis. And the next slide shows the results of the public awareness of biotechnology, which is increasing compared to 1997 telephone survey. There was a change in the method of distribution of survey questionnaire in the 2003 survey by directly asking householders to fill out questionnaires. On the other hand, in the 2000 survey, questionnaires were dropped into the post box of each house. And because of this change in methods, more of the people who are not interested might respond than the previous survey, and we got better response rate as well. And therefore, the awareness of the public is likely to decrease compared to 2000. However, still we can infer the increase of the public awareness since 1997. Besides awareness and knowledge, understanding is a factor of acceptance of new technologies in order to measure people's perceptions of benefits and risks. Self-evaluation of respondents' attitudes towards usefulness, risk, and overall encouragement of the application was scored depending on the degree of the attitudes. And in cases of people who definitely agree with the use of the application, the score will be about 6 points. And the next, please. On one hand, in case of people who definitely disagree, the score will be minus 6 points. And next, please. And in the case of people who balance benefits and risks, and it is conditional approval or disapproval, the score will be in between minus 6 and plus 6 points. And the next slide shows the results of the scoring of the 2000 survey. Comparison between the public and scientists was made. We can see the similar tendency of acceptance between the public and scientists from this graph. However, there is no wonder why more scientists are more positive towards biotech since they are engaged in the field. Medicines and cancer mouse were the most accepted applications of the 6 example applications. and food produced by modern biotech, pest-resistant crop, and genetic testing for wood. The least accepted application was xenotransplantation. The next slide shows the trends of the public since 1997. It is clear that the acceptance of food and xenotransplantation has been decreasing. In order to explore the reasons of the respondents' attitudes, open spaces were combined with self-evaluation scales. And next, please. The reasons given in the open spaces were categorized into 7 broad groups: human benefits, balanced view, risky, ethical issues, we don't need, a natural, and personal choice. And next, please. The comparison of the result was made between 2000 and 2003, as shown in the slide. One of the reasons for the decreased acceptance of food application was the less people saw benefits on the top part. And for medicines, people's attitude became slightly more positive from 2002. This would be partly increased balanced view, which is a second part. And next is a reason for risks. For risks, as we saw the decreased acceptance in xenotransplantation, one factor was more perceived risks on this application. For genetic testing, there was a significant decrease in the proportion of ethical concerns, while those risk, concern, and benefits increased. And then the next is a summary of the result of moral acceptability. Perceived benefits of genetic testing increased, as seen in the previous slide. The next is a result of overall encouragement. Here again, more people saw benefits of medicine. And for genetic testing, more respondents expressed more of a balanced view than they did in 2000, which might lead to more of the public accepting this application. Since this is the overview of the analysis of the survey results, each single factor for people's attitude needs to be identified. Next. And since survey forms have the limitation for raising reason in its space, simple and short comments are likely to be obtained. Therefore, in order to explore deeper reasons and to see the process on how people lead to their answers, interviews were conducted. This is an example of this post-analysis to conceptualize people's idea about genetic testing. The part A is a core idea of this interviewee about freedom of reproduction. And in part B1, he expanded the idea up to the area of society. And in B2, he raised his concern, which would be the main concern for him. In the following part C1, he expressed his conditional approval combined with the idea of individual freedom. Although he expressed his conditional approval, he brought another idea of social acceptance in B3. And finally, he again expressed conditional approval as a conclusion. And these ideas were conceptualized and mapped as an example shown here. We can see some relations between ideas and also how the balancing of ideas of each area can be seen. In this case, he was balancing between individual freedom, explained as self-love, and discrimination as a social concern, explained as do no harm, and trying to raise ideas on how the harm can be reduced. Other possible ideas would be the level of family or ecosystem some people may raise. And next, in conclusion, how people balance benefits and risks of new technologies can be measured. When we say bioethical maturity, it is understood as balancing perceived benefits and risks. Therefore, some measurement and indices will be helpful to see bioethical maturity. And there are different ways to conceptualize people's idea, for example, discourse analysis. And research is needed on how to map ideas. This enables us to see the balance and relation of ideas, how people relate situation to the ideas and experiences, or how people deal with dilemmas. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Masa, are there any questions? Chalu?
Thank you very much. I was just wondering as to how you came up with the criteria for the scoring algorithm.
Yes. Coding was done by two people checking the categorization each other. First person, for example, can set a set of category, and the other person can follow. Similarly, the other person can also category again, and both can check each other to be consistent with category. And if there are some categories which are not consistent with each other, in that case, the definition has to be discussed with each other.
And these two processes were done both in English and Japanese. Irina.
Thank you, Masa. What was the percentage of response rate?
In 2000, 2003.
Does it go up? I mean, normally, say with questionnaires, say in Australia, we may have a response rate of 20-25%, which means that there's 80% worth of ideas which are not even scored. And is that going up with education? Like 98, 2000, 2003, 97, I'm sorry.
Education is, for example, the public and scientists.
Well, in the time, over the 9 years, has the response rate increased?
In some cases, the response rate decreased for, I think, for some other reasons. For example, people are busy, becoming busy or something like that. For other social.
And have you got a percentage of response rate?
Yes.
2003.
In
2003.
I mean,
How much less percentage?
how many people filled in the questionnaire and verified?
In 2000, around 12%.
Okay.
In 2003, 18%.
Okay. So it is less than 20%.
Yes.
1993 was 25%, and 1991, 25%. So social fatigue,
Getting
high
busy.
company mailing is one factor. Rana was next, and then Steve.
Thank you, Masa, for your presentation. Just a comment. I think it is very important to conduct such study in order to educate the public about bioethics and biotechnology. Just an idea about medicine and the application of medical field. The public accept that how it's benefit for the society or for the human being. But when we start to speak about food, biotechnology, and of course start to be skeptical, and we ask a lot of questions if really it will be useful, it will be helpful, and so. But I have wondering why when we introduced, for example, the fast food, the junky food, nobody spoke about the introduction of this in the market and to offer that to the public. And people accept that, and then we start as a physician and to criticize that. But in biotechnology, we start to speak about and you create skepticism within the population. I think there is some problem here, how to introduce that. And we know that for the fast food and the junky food, how it is harmful, how it will create problem for physician and for the society. I think we have to weigh things between that so and that, and to be fair when we want to choose between such food, for instance, the kind of food or what we can expect from the biotechnology in agriculture. Thank you.
I think that's a long comment. Steve was next, and then Dawn.
Yes, first of all, I want to commend you, Daryl, you and your staff for the fine work you all have been doing with these surveys. So you've been doing these for a number of years, and they're a treasure trove. It's a treasure trove of information about what people are thinking in Japan about biotech. And I go to the website a lot to see what's the data, but I'm not aware of any other organization that does so much on a regular basis of surveying the general population. The question that I have, do you have a sense of the extent to which policymakers in Japan are looking at this data, whether it's the results of your data or whether are similar organizations doing these kinds of surveys? I know the Somucho, the Japanese government, occasionally does surveys about cloning and some other things, but do you sense that the policymakers are seriously looking at this information about public perceptions and public understanding as they go about making public policy in this area?
Question was Japanese policymaker will utilize the results.
Yes, will this have an impact on the policymaking process in Japan?
So I think some part of the process of policymaking has used these surveys. The biotechnology industry has used the surveys, especially in 91, 93, when there were not many other surveys being done. More recently, there are other groups doing surveys as well. But they used it, but they may have used it to become a bit more cautious about biotechnology, and it also educated them. After about 10 years, they understood that even if you teach people lots of education and information, they're still going to have concerns about biotechnology. And I've been trying to say this for more than 10 years, to say, well, it's a healthy society that has concerns, in fact, so it's something to value. So in fact, we've recently seen a change in Japan Bioindustry Association has set up an NGO called the Life and Bio Plaza 21, which is shifting from public acceptance to public understanding as a concept in the relationship between society and biotechnology. So it's taken some time, but I think they're going to understand that these social concerns are to be valued and to enter into dialogue rather than just as an obstacle to overcome through better education. The next question and last question, Joan.
I don't think I need a microphone. It touches on that. I was just curious about Lana's use of education, and I just wondered, is this education or is it advertisement? Not somewhat rhetorical, but, and what role does bioethics play in well, excuse me, it's a rather crude expression, but it captures a certain truth. Bioethics is the KY jelly of medicine, or bioethics is the KY jelly of biotech industry. So I just put that out there.
Could you translate KY jelly?
Would anybody like to help? Now, the KY jelly is a product used in sexual intercourse.
It's a lubricant.
That's it. Thank you. Thank you. In the abstract.
Thank you. Frank, is it
I think that, your name is Joan?
Yes.
Yeah, Joan, hi. I think Joan made it, I don't need to thank. Joan made it a very important point. There's been a lot of stuff published these days about bioethicists being dependent upon drug companies or other interests for their livelihood. Healy, who had the controversy about with the University of Toronto when he was his invitation to take for employment there was canceled because he gave a lecture disagreeing with some drug company about something. Which I think is a very important point. How much of bioethics is influenced by business interests? And I think we have to be aware of that. And I think that Joan said something very important to bring that up.
Yeah. I think that's, can I just kind of jump in here? As some of you may know, that is a big topic of discussion in the U.S. now. I know at my campus, there's been talk of setting up a bioethics institute, and there's been a lot of opposition among the faculty that this will easily become captured by the local biotech industry. We're in a region where there's a very strong biotech industry, and I work in public education on a nonprofit foundation that sponsors public education events, and I have diminished my participation in that because it has become a vehicle by which local biotech firms get out there and they sponsor these events, and they use these events as arenas for advertising their product. Now, they're doing a good service with education, and they're trying desperately to improve public acceptance, but at the same time, they're framing the terms of the debate in a way that makes a number of us academics, pointy-headed academics, uncomfortable. Is that happening in Japan to the same degree? No?
Maybe I'll reply, and this was the last comment. There are concerns because the trust in industry is decreasing and already very little. But it actually is a dilemma in these studies. This 2003 study is paid for by the Ministry of Economic Trade, International Trade and Industry, subcontracted through Japan Bioindustry Association in a project on bioethics. So we got the money and do and talk about anything we like. So they have the plaza for free exchange of ideas, and I did not feel any inhibition on what I report or how I report such a study. So the money is coming from the government, but without part of the government, not through the Ministry of Education. So I think we're going to
just add one thing to that?
Yes.
Okay. The big problem is how we can get free of this. Okay, because most of us here work for universities which are supported by big donors, and they love to have some academic freedom. It's good to disagree because then they can say how free they are. However, there's always going to be a limit to it. Okay, and unless the only way I can see of being free of conflict of interest is if we were to break contact with the academic world and set up like a commune and support ourselves with manual labor, and then we could be totally free and not dependent on anybody. Short of that, I think that we're all going to be, at least to some slight extent, prostituting ourselves if we're in the academic world.
I agree.
So, thank you very much. Thank you. So, in fact, this mental map was even a secret from my students until 9 o'clock this morning when it came and was unveiled. So, everyone was making their ideas. I also should point out that Master conducted with led the team conducting the 2003 survey, and Marianne led the team conducting the 2000 survey. In fact, there were less people there. She's at the back. So if you have some questions on surveys, please ask them as well. The next talk is from Tim Boyle. He's going to talk on idea diversity and cultural borrowing. Thank you.
Okay, so well, this is a topic's kind of a little bit different than what we've been talking about so far. Oh, but anyway, Daryl asked me if I would present something on this. It's been kind of a hobby of mine, and I've done a lot of reading and research into these type of things. And so what I wanted just to do is simply to give a couple examples of how ideas progress in society and stuff. And I started off with a Bible quote here from Koheleth, or as it used to be called, Ecclesiastes. Koheleth is the philosopher, and of course this is written like 2,000 years ago. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. I suppose maybe that was at a time when there wasn't a whole lot of technological progress and stuff going on, but obviously we're not talking about there's no new technology. There's lots of that kind of thing going on. But at least a lot of the basic ideas and stuff have been around a long time. Now, when we look at the kind of similarities as we have in across cultures and whatever, it seems to me that there are really only three basic causes for these commonality. One would be descent from a common source. It would seem like we have a little font problem here with the thing, but anyway, it's descent from common cause, adoption from an outside source, and then the third one would be independent multiple origins. And I think that in my reading and stuff, I've seen that the number three has been kind of assumed to be often the case. And I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. It is not negligible. But it's my contention that the first two causes are really much more common than has typically been said. You got a problem over here? Oh, okay. All right. So what I propose to do is just take a couple of examples. Oh yeah, we got to flip this slide here. I can't do that with mine over here. Yeah, okay, we're here. Okay, so for the first one, for common descent, this is just a sample of an idea. We have many versions of the story of the Great Flood that are contained in the ancient tales of many civilizations around the world. And I got this from a website, which you can see up there. There's several other websites on this subject. The details of these stories, of course, differ quite a bit. There's over 200 that I've seen documented. And of course, not all ancient societies have this. Some apparently have. If they did have it at one time, it's been lost through time and stuff. But many of these things, they have this series of commonalities. Not all the stories have all of these points by any means, but some of them do. And we have the humans are guilty of transgression. The God or the gods send a flood as punishment. Instructions are sent to an individual to build a craft. And of course, there's a whole variety of options there in the stories. Some of them are rather fanciful, and of course, some of them are like it's not like he actually built it, but it was provided by the gods or something like that. There's a lot of variety there. And then the instructions include ensuring the survival of all species. And the flood destroys an old race, and after the flood, a less new simpler race emerges to repopulate the earth. So these are kind of common threads through all these ancient stories. And I've got a couple of examples on the next slide here. That this one here from the Aztec civilization these are summaries. They're obviously, the story's much longer than this, of course, but if you just summarize the main points. We have, this was, I thought was particularly interesting. It says, in the Valley of Mexico, there lived a pious man named Tapi. The Creator told him to build a boat to live in and take his wife and a pair of every animal that existed. Neighbors thought he was crazy. As soon as he finished, it began to rain. The valley flooded, men and animals went to the mountains, but they were submerged. The rain ended, the waters receded, and then Tapi realized that floodwaters had receded after having sent a dove that did not return, and Tapi rejoiced. So it sounds rather similar to the story of Noah that you find in the Bible. And then Hawaiian legend was that, this is a little bit more, is not quite as detailed, but Hawaiian legend tells of a flood in which all beings were killed except for Nu and his family, who repopulated the earth when their boat landed on top of Mauna Kea, which is the highest mountain in Hawaii, you see. And so, it's kind of interesting that there's a couple hundred of these types of stories from around the world. Next. One I'm kind of interested in is in China. So there exist these kind of flood legends and stuff, but I wanted to briefly look at some circumstantial evidence in the origin of Chinese characters themselves. And I've written a little book on this, so I'll share it in just a minute, just briefly. But if you just look at the outline of, for instance, the character for a ship, a large ship, it has the left-hand radical is for a boat, and it has 8 mouths, or 8 people, 8 mouths on a boat. And where did they get that idea? Why is that association there? Nobody knows. It was we don't have any evidence for what was in the minds of scribes 4,000 years ago when they devised these things, but there's lots of them that kind of fit. And this one for flood, I had another slide down here, but it disappeared somehow in the thing, but I'll just describe it. This is an ancient form, roughly 3,500 years ago, and the earliest examples of Chinese characters that still exist. This is the type of writing it was, much more pictorial. And what we have is the symbol for water, which becomes this thing over here in the modern form right there on that side. And then it's covering a circle, and that circle then is reduced to just that one line in the modern form. And then we have, again, we have the number for 8. Just these 2 lines is the same as over here, and that's the number for 8. That's the number they use today in Chinese characters for 8 is just that, those 2 lines. And then we have, you can speculate what these 2 hands up reach, like maybe they're crying for help or whatever. You can speculate what that was symbolizing, but we have these 2 hands lifting up. And so, this ancient form becomes the modern form of the character for flood. And there's a number of other ones that are related, that seem to be similar to the stories that you find in the Bible. And so, next slide then. So actually, if we have a little bit of if you allow me to have a little commercial here, I actually wrote a book just recently, and I have an older Japanese version of it, and then this is the one I just put out recently. But just look at the one like for a tower. It's made of humanity. That's and then there's one, and then a mouth, or it could be also mean language, and that's to unite. So if people had one language, we'd all be united. That sounds like a nice thing. And then you put that together with dirt and grass, and you get the symbol for a tower, which sounds kind of like the Tower of Babel story in the Bible. But anyway, if you're interested in this, I have you can look at it later and stuff. But next slide. And so I think there's 2 primary ways of explaining these similarities. One would be coincidence, of course. Practically every culture has disastrous floods at one time or another, and these could be explained by mythology. But sometimes the stories are unawful. It seems like they're much too close to be just by chance. And so the other possibility would be that there's actually is a common source. And as in my reading and stuff, there's of course still debate about this particular thing, but it seems that the DNA studies, for the mitochondrial DNA and the Y chromosome DNA, do conclude that humans emerged from a common ancestral pair in the order of 50,000 years ago, maybe 60, 70, who knows, but in that general range. And so if a flood did take place early in the history of humanity, that was a major flood like this, then it's logical that this distant memory might have been carried on by word of mouth for thousands of years and ended up in these stories. So the point I'm making is that with this particular example is that there often could be a common source for similar ideas that seem completely disparate, and their cultures are far separated in time and space, and yet they still might have a common source for a certain idea. Okay, that's the one common source example. We go to the next one. The other example is the borrowing from each other. And my basic premise is that speaking of religions at this point, but it's also true of other things, I think, as well. But all religious systems have borrowed and adapted concepts and traditions from other religions or other philosophies or whatever. And the particular one I'm looking at is the spread of Christian concepts along the Silk Road as far as Japan in ancient times. And so a few pertinent facts that There's in South India. There's the Church of the Martama Church is called, which they claim that St. Thomas was in India by 52 AD, and there's a good bit of evidence to point that this is an extremely ancient church that went very quickly from Israel, the ancient Near East, very quickly to South India, and then a recent discovery in near Shanghai. It's reported in the Daily News. Matter of fact, I have a copy of it over here if you're interested in looking at it later. But of Christian artifacts and tombs near Shanghai, dating from 86 AD. So that's really very early. Only how many years would that be? Maybe 50 years at the most after the start of Christianity. And the Assyrian Church of the East, which is known in the West as the Nestorians, they don't particularly like that term because the Nestorians was not their founder at all, but that's what we call it in the West. It was well established in China during the Tang Dynasty, which would be very early in this dynasty. The main start of it was around 625, I believe. And this was called, I'm not sure if I pronounced this right, Jingjiao, which is Keikyo in Japanese pronunciation, and these characters here, which just means luminous teachings. But it is Eastern Christianity, is what it is. And it entered Japan in a big way with the mass immigration of the Hatta clan. There's this would be a clan that came from Central Asia via China and Korea. And these people had an enormous influence on ancient Japan. And I'm not sure how much time I'll have to go into any of that, but okay, let's see. Let me see where I am here. Okay, so the next slide here, typically Japan has been thought of as having a Shinto or Buddhist culture from ancient times. And of course, that's true, and that Christianity is said to have first entered Japan in 1549 with Xavier. But it's my contention that this needs to be modified somewhat. It's true if you mean by Christianity, you mean Western Christianity, European-style Christianity. That's true that it first came with Xavier. But this Keikyo, or Nestorianism, was here long before. And it left its legacy in the form of many adopted ideas. And so this is just the example I'm using to show that there's lots of adoption of ideas back and forth. And then you transform it into your own thing, and maybe it looks very different, but really has a common source in that sense. Next slide then. Just a few quick facts on that. And for instance, important Buddhist figures such as Honen, Kukai, boy, it's really got messed up in it, Kukai and Shinran were exposed to Keikyo teachings in China and clearly adopted important concepts into their own thinking. And the second point is, the Shingon sect, founded by Kukai, readily admits, and they even take pride in having its roots in Keikyo, which is this Eastern form of Christianity. They say it themselves, And so this, I think, explains some of the close parallels you see among these various Japanese Buddhist sects with say, biblical ideas, because they actually borrowed it. For instance, another one is interesting, is that later generations turned Prince Shotoku into a messianic figure that clearly paralleled the stories of Christ. Prince Shotoku was one of the main figures around the 600 AD in Japan, and when you get a few hundred years after that, he's been turned into this Buddhist saint. But if you look at the stories, he says, like his mother, the angel appeared to his mother and announced his birth, and he was born in a stable, and all these miracle stories and stuff. It parallels at many points the story of Christ, and it's applied to Prince Shotoku in these legends. And then there's a number of historic Shinto shrines and Buddhist temples connected with the Hatta clan in particular that still contain numerous clues pointing to their Keikyo origins. And I don't have time to go into a lot of that, but there is a number of very clear evidence that's showing that there's this relationship with that. So the conclusion is that many aspects of Japanese Buddhism were adopted and adapted from Keikyo Christianity. And this is a clear example of how concepts and forms that show similarities and that are usually thought of as having arisen independently actually have been borrowed. And I don't mean this to point that the borrowing goes the opposite way as well. It's not just a one-way thing. There's borrowing going all over the place, and it's been going on since very ancient times. So that's the main point I'm trying to make there, which then relates to whether ideas are finite or infinite and that kind of thing. And just as a last little thing, it's sort of a little speculation. This is, yeah, next slide then. If we can read the next slide. Can you get the next slide up there? Yeah, right here. Okay, this is a little speculation on my part. You know, the Christ motif of a savior entering human history from outside appears to have found its way into many stories. For instance, in Japan, we have this Momotaro story, this ancient Japanese fairy tale of a boy that is born in a giant peach that floats up to a farmhouse, and he is raised by the farmer and becomes a kind of savior who vanquishes evil with his power. You know, of course, this is just a speculation on my part. There's no evidence that this is actually the case, but I'm thinking it's likely that it is. And in modern terms, even like a story like Superman, you know, it's a common motif. What would prove this? What would disprove this speculation on my part would be finding a story with the same motif that's previous to Christ, you know, BC. If that exists, well, then this is not quite true. But I don't know of anything like that, and so it's just the point I'm making is that there's this borrowing of kernel ideas that are taken and then transformed into your own ideas and your own format, and then look quite different, but you really have a common source. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Ali first, please.
Next, we're ready here.
Thank you for a nice presentation. Just a comment regarding, you mentioned about borrowing the ideas from each other. Actually, in Islam, in Quran, which is Holy Book of Muslims, the Almighty God explicitly mentioned about the story of Nuh or Noah, that he was a prophet, just like Muhammad or Jesus and Musa, peace be upon them. And there's a clear story about him, and we believe that the source of this story is God the Almighty, who gave to his prophets, first to the Musa, and then to Isa, and then to Muhammad, peace be upon them.
Yeah, in other words, that there's the story. My point here is not whether the story is actual factual history or not. My own feeling is that it is based on a historical event. And that there is this common thread, but at least the idea is the same across so many cultures, and that was the main point for this particular study.
Frank,
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I've also been very interested in the early influence on Shinto, and I thought it should be commented that there's a lot of literature that argues, I'm not going to say that it's evidence, it has to be examined,
right.
That of Jewish influence, or Israeli actually, influence on Japan much earlier than Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
I have a pamphlet at home arguing, you might be familiar with this, that the Hatta tribe was Israeli, that it was the tribe of Yehuda. And they bring all sorts of artifacts and things, and there's also a website, the 10 tribes, the lost tribes in Japan, with some really amazing similarities between our customs and Shinto customs.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Might go back, yeah, I know, because we corresponded on it
Yeah,
a little bit by email. I just thought it should mention it for the conference, that it might go back a lot earlier than Christianity.
Oh yeah, I think it does, and because the Silk Road itself is much older than, I mean, Silk Road was been going on, I guess maybe at least 3,000 or 4,000 years, and then it was much more active in the past than has often been realized.
Thanks, Tim, for a very interesting presentation, and I agree completely with your main point. But you mentioned that if there was an earlier origin of the Momotaro story, maybe it didn't come from the Christ story, but how about if there was an earlier origin of the Momotaro story, maybe that's the origin of the Christ story?
I mean, theoretically, it's possible, of course, But I say, again, we're totally in the world of speculation here, and it's kind of hard to come up with hard evidence when you're talking about these kind of ancient things like this. So, theoretically, sure, that's possible. I don't think so, but that's a different story. Okay, Irina.
This follows on nicely from your comment, Rick. The Australian Aboriginal people, they lived in Australia It's been shown now for 60,000 years in isolation. I'm not exactly sure of the whole stories, but they have got a flood story as well,
Yeah.
which precedes, I guess, the scribes in the East and in
Oh, sure, of
Europe.
course.
Yeah.
Well, just on that
And
point,
it's
for
an
instance-
oral tradition, generation from generation.
Well, for instance, recently National Geographic had this article about this giant flood in the Black Sea being the origin of the Noah story. Well, I think it's quite clear that it can't be, because if there's a common story, and the common source, it has to be, for instance, the Aztecs, they had to have crossed the Bering Sea land bridge around, at the latest, around 11,000 years ago, because it had disappeared. And so you know that it had to precede that. And so, you know, I would think it's at least 20 or 30,000 years, or maybe more, if you say. I mean,
So maybe you're right in one of your comments that it goes back to the human origin.
So
It's
really
been
early.
shown now that we just all one race.
Mhm.
You know, there aren't even any races. We had a common origin out of Africa.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Tim. And so, we're going to, Tim will put the book, which is very interesting, on display at lunchtime.
Yeah,
There's
at
also
lunchtime,
other
right.
materials there too. Now, I just would like to make an announcement that lunch will probably be about 12:40 or so. And we'll start the afternoon session also later. We have more time in the afternoon, so I'll be humane. And we're not yet engineered to do it up too long. I'm going to pass it to Tsuyoshi. Are you going to sit there?
Hello everybody. My name is Tsuyoshi Awaya from Okayama University, Japan. So my presentation is not important, so you can go to the rest room or you can sleep but don't snore. My English is poor, so I use my computer. My topic is about difficult future. How should upgraded humans treat high efficiency human robots and gene enhanced animals? My presentation is composed of these 4 parts. Part 1. Currently, the development of humanoid robot is making progress. The need for high efficiency humanoid robot is great. Primitive humanoid robots have been made in Japan in the past. Now, in particular, high efficiency humanoid robots are the heartthrob for Japanese people. Exhibitions of the Honda humanoid robots are a great success. On the future production line of this Honda humanoid robot, there is a high efficiency humanoid robot which has the appearance of the human and intelligence and feeling was something similar, equal to or more than humans. There is a considerable possibility that they will appear in the future. Professor Hans Moravec, AI researcher at Carnegie Mellon University, USA, who is called the Emperor of Robots, says that the intelligence of the current robot is at insect level, but the performance of a computer will increase 1 million times in the next 30 years, and the intelligence of a robot will be at ape level in 2030. After that, it will become equal to the intelligence of humans in the year 2040. And Professor Rodney Brooks, robot science at Carnegie Mellon University, USA, says that once humans discarded the notion that the Earth was the center of the universe, and at the time of Darwin, humans discarded the notion that we are fundamentally different from animals. And now humans have to discard the notion that the life form or something similar, which has the highest intelligence on the earth, is human. By the way, can we not love humanoid robots because they are not human, even though they have a human appearance. I, at least, do not think that I cannot love a female robot only for the reason that the contents of the robot are machines. The love between a male and female should be possible between humans and robots. Originally, the target of love is not limited to humans. There are many people who love their pets. There are people who love robot pets in Japan, cars, diamonds, etc. As for the love between human robots and humans, the science fiction movie Blade Runner, Andrew NDR 114, AI, etc. are suggested. Part 2. It is said that many kinds of mammals have rich feelings. For family example, dogs are said to have this quality. It is said for us to understand that dogs have rich feelings if we keep them as pets. In addition, it is said that some kinds of primates have considerable intelligence. It is said that a bonobo, pygmy chimpanzee, has intelligence to the same degree as a 2.5-year-old human infant in its ability to understand language. The matter mentioned earlier applies to all of these animals. Furthermore, as for some kinds of animals, upgrading from pet to companion animal has begun. Some people are treating animals as a member of the family, and animals are even sex partners for some people. Here also, the matter mentioned earlier applies to these animals. It is natural that there is a need for gene-enhanced animals. There are many people who think that animals would be nicer or more useful if they become a little smarter. The science fiction movie Planet of the Apes has a scene where a gene-enhanced chimpanzee performs space exploration instead of humans. There are some people who think their pet is more important than an ill-natured next-door neighbor, and it would be nice if their pet spoke. In America, the popular cartoon where a talking dog named Scooby-Doo plays an active role has been broadcasted for over 20 years. In a questionnaire in Japan asking what do you want to be materialized now, a talking dog came in second place among 4 answers. In this connection, when I searched dog which speaks with internet search engine Google, 522 cases succeeded, and 521 cases succeeded for cat which speaks. I think that there is sufficient need for gene-enhanced animals, but we have no technology that enables animals to speak at the moment. However, the genetically engineered smart mouse doggy, which cannot speak but has a high ability of learning and memory compared with a natural mouse, was produced in 1999. Gene-enhanced animals with high intelligence and feelings, or something similar, equal to or more than humans, will be produced by means of the technologies of gene enhancement, etc. in the future. Part 3. Human remodeling includes 3 directions: cyborgization, chimerization, and genetic modification. Of course, the tool of this human remodeling technologies. Recently, human remodeling due to technologies including robot technology, gene technology, etc. is making progress rapidly. In addition, brain remodeling comes into view. Human remodeling is one of the integrated points of modern technologies. Part 1. Human cyborgization means human becoming a cyborg. There are many synthetic structures being implanted into people today, including artificial hearts, artificial bones, artificial joints, artificial blood vessels, artificial teeth, dental amalgam, silicone for breast, etc. It seems that many of us are at least partially artificial. The artificialization of the human body leads to human cyborgization. High-tech artificial legs controlled by computer, implanted artificial inner ears, etc. have already been developed regardless of whether it is desirable or not. Human cyborgization has in fact already begun. In addition, while robot technology has been progressing by leaps and bounds, it will contribute to this human cyborgization greatly. So, part 2. Human genetic modification means human remodeling due to gene manipulation. Concretely speaking, it means eugenic human remodeling due to gene manipulation to a germ cell, fertilizer, egg, embryo, fetus, or human, such as the removal of a harmful gene or additional of a useful gene. Usually, this kind of gene manipulation is called gene enhancement. Current gene therapy for genetic diseases is the first step of human genetic modification. This human genetic modification leads to becoming so-called gene-rich substantially. Gene-rich means the person who has many useful genes as a result of gene manipulation, according to Professor Ray Silver, geneticist at the Princeton University. The person who is not is called natural. By the way, Professor Silver says that in the future, human will be polarized into two classes, gene-rich class and natural class. I almost definitely think gene-rich will appear in the future, as he says. However, I do not believe the polarization. I think it is a very American idea. I think most of the people will be gene-rich in various degrees. Professor Silver boldly predicts an appearance of photosynthesis humans who get energy by photosynthesis, by gene manipulation as a far-off matter. He said the skin of these humans is dark green. Indeed, there is no reason to continue to be the skin color we have now, but it can only be described as grotesque at best at this time. Subpart 3. Human remodeling based on human desires. Of course, technologies are the means of fulfilling these human desires. We live in the society to pursue desires thoroughly. The explosion of human desires is happening. In the first place, civilization itself is a system by which human desires are fulfilled, and technology and market economy are the driving force of modern civilization. So fundamentally, human remodeling will continue to progress insofar as humankind has a strong will to stop it. Of course, technical limitations are big for the present, but they will have been overcome a little by little. Regardless of whether it is desirable or not, human remodeling is not a pathology but a physiology in modern civilization. It would seem that we humans have begun to work toward artificial evolution. Superhumans or post-humans probably appear in the future. In other words, humans will be upgraded by means of the technologies of gene enhancement, cyborgization, etc. in the future. Part 4. So far, neither humanoid robots nor animals are human. Therefore, they do not enter the circle of our coexistence and co-prosperity, at least at the moment. In particular, from a legal viewpoint, they do not have eligibility for rights and duties. Both animals and human robots are legally not the subject of rights, but the object of rights, namely things. Then, how should upgraded human treat high-efficiency humanoid robots or gene-enhanced animals with high intelligence and feelings, or something similar, equal to or more than humans in the future? Initially, humans can choose not to allow their appearance, keeping in mind their potential danger. About robots in particular, if the future world emerges where, like a science fiction movie, high-efficiency humanoid robots control humans, it will be awful. For example, the science fiction movie Terminator 2 depicts a future world where humans resist robots, robot dominance desperately. Though I cannot judge whether it is a joke or whether he's serious. Professor Hans Moravec mentioned earlier, states that by the year 2050, humans will have the same value as a senile poodle and will be humiliated by almighty robots, which humans create. But so far, humans are not likely to choose not to allow the appearance of gene-enhanced animals and high-efficiency humanoid robots. As I mentioned earlier, high-efficiency humanoid robots in particular are the heartthrob for people. Then what will happen if humankind will allow the appearance of high-efficiency humanoid robots and or gene-enhanced animals with high intelligence and feelings or something similar equal to or more than humans? As far as we allow their appearance, the choice of humans not to treat them as human or as equal to human for the reason that they are not biologically will become impossible. That is to say, the need to give rights as humans or the same rights as humans to some robots and animals which satisfy certain conditions will come out. In other words, it will become impossible for humankind to continue keeping them out of the circle of coexistence and co-prosperity. In terms of the method by which to bring about such result, humankind will have two options. One is a change in the notion of human. Another is a resetting of the circle of coexistence and co-prosperity. Going into details, the former is the idea that expanding the notion of human, a life form or something similar that has intelligence, whether explicitly or potentially, is human. If we do so, the result is that gene-enhanced animals and high-efficiency humanoid robots that satisfy certain conditions enter the category of human. That is, they are human. In order to get that result, legislation is needed that a life form or something similar that has intelligence is human. They will have a right as a human by doing so. The latter is the idea that gene-enhanced animals and high-efficiency humanoid robots do not enter the category of human, but rather humans reset the circle of coexistence and co-prosperity so that some of them that satisfy certain conditions enter the circle. In order to do so, legislation is needed that humans treat gene-enhanced animals and high-efficiency humanoid robots that satisfy certain conditions as the same as humans. That is to say that they have the same rights as humans, though they are not human. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
My English is poor, so please speak slowly.
Are there any questions? I know your English is very good. Frank, you don't need the mic.
Tsuyoshi, I think your approach is correct in asking the question, how will we treat these creatures, these humanoid robots and so on. It's similar to the debate about cloning. I think it's a waste of time to argue whether it should be allowed or forbidden. Things are going to happen that we don't really want, and then we have to decide. The big question is, how will we behave when these things happen? So the important question is, how will we treat the humanoid robots? On the other hand, I don't agree with your conclusion or your answer, because you seem to think that if they behave like humans, then they should have the same rights. Okay? This I'm not sure of. You said earlier, you quoted someone early on who said that the intelligence of today's computers is about like an insect. Okay? However, if you injure an insect, it acts like it feels pain, and I think it really does feel pain. If you injure a computer, it might be programmed to act as if it feels pain, but I don't think it feels pain. Okay? If you create a robot that acts as if it has feelings, love and pain and so on, okay? It does not necessarily mean that there's a mind inside, a mind which actually feels, okay? So my question is, wouldn't it be possible that you could have, the old word used to be a Turing machine, but that you could have a robot which in all ways externally acted like a human being, but inside there's nothing, there's no spirit. Okay, so it doesn't have to have any rights. We can kick it or do anything we want to it.
Wait a minute, so I need translation. So, わかりました。何が結局みたいな。
結局はロボットというのは心を持たないんで、そういうのに権利とかですね、そういうことが必要なの。権利が必要か。権利が必要か。心がない。
Yeah, so robot may have a mind, fake mind or something similar. So it's a bit controversial. So among the robot scientists, I'm not sure, but it's controversial.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rob, please.
Yes, friend, but if you would set the standard of feeling pain and having the mind as being subject of rights, what about somebody who is in a vegetative state? Probably you wouldn't, we couldn't say that the person feels something, but he or she has the rights.
The problem with the vegetative state is that we don't know what's going on inside. They can't communicate with the environment, but we have no evidence that they don't have some feeling going on that we can't be aware of. Secondly, a patient in a persistent vegetative state is possibly in a reversible situation. In other words, people can be in a persistent vegetative state for as long as 4 or more months and then be brought back to various levels of consciousness, including very, very high levels of consciousness and performance, which is, and so in the case of somebody in a persistent vegetative state, I would regard this as a human being. Okay?
Yeah.
In the case of the robot, the persistent the person in the PBS was a person, a full person, and might become a full person again. Whereas the robot, I don't know if it ever was a full person.
No, but I was just focusing on what you mentioned, feeling pain. If that's connecting with being able of being a person and having the right.
Yeah. Okay.
That was the point.
Well, the person in the PBS did feel pain and might feel pain again. Just like somebody who's asleep right now and is not aware of anything going on.
Transformation and so on. For which purpose? I would like to return to Darren map. It is setting on love. So with the gene-enhanced animal and the humanoid robot, so they are seeking for love. That would replace the next door neighbor and so on. If we are searching, we would like, we are looking for love. So we are going to transform with animals and so on. I think there is an ethical problem here about this human feeling. Or as Frank said, we need to add to other things to feel something different. Maybe for that, what's the real problem? And I think we can resort that there's some solution in other place, maybe in this lab. Thank you.
Yeah. My presentation is different from his idea. He loves his theory is bioethics lab, so mine is not related to his And the biggest problem is war among animals, human robots, and humans. It's the biggest problem in the future.
Madame, next.
The last one.
Community spirit.